Welcome to the Academic Resource Center's presentation on how you can improve your reading skills. Many of us take reading for granted, but it is actually a complex system of deriving meaning from print that requires the following skills. Let's start from the bottom of this cone and move upwards. Reading is an understanding of how speech sounds are related to printed words. Decoding skills, which are the ability to easily and rapidly identify words. Fluency, which is the ability to identify words with speed, accuracy, and expression. A fluent reader interprets while reading to determine appropriate phrasing and the writer's intended expressions of tone and meaning, humor, irony, anger, etc. The ability to interpret while reading indicates comprehension of the writer's message. Next, vocabulary and background knowledge. At higher reading levels, vocabulary knowledge is critical for understanding increasingly difficult materials. Learners not only need to learn new words, they need to deepen their knowledge of words they already know. Active comprehension strategies. Comprehension involves all the components we are discussing and also applies to all reading skill levels. And finally, motivation. We can motivate ourselves to improve our reading practice by seeing reading as a pathway to attain personal goals. The ability to read well allows us to take reading out of the classroom and into lifelong learning. We have the power to educate ourselves about anything that we desire to know. Keep in mind that these reading components should not be seen as sequential. In other words, students don't learn speech sounds, then decoding, then become fluent, then develop vocabulary, and then focus on comprehension. Although the alphabetic skills, speech sounds, and decoding are a primary focus of beginning instruction, all the components reinforce each other and as a result often develop at the same time. Comprehension is the goal of reading, and all reading components work together to develop strong comprehension. Detecting individual speech sounds within words is required for developing accurate decoding skills. Decoding, which is identifying words and word parts like syllables, prefixes, and suffixes, is necessary to develop fluency. Fluency, which is reading with accuracy, speed, and expression, is developed by decoding words. Decoding builds vocabulary. Vocabulary helps us recognize speech sounds and is vital to all reading levels. Because so much learning takes place outside of class, it is important to have tools and to develop habits that facilitate learning on your own. No matter what your current reading level is, you can make improvements by doing the following. Listening to a recorded book and also reading the printed version. This way you can hear words that are unfamiliar to learn how they are pronounced and then see them to learn how they are spelled. As you learn new words, write them down so you can review them as needed and desired. It can also be helpful to see how speech is translated into print by accessing the closed caption feature when watching movies, TV shows, or other video recordings. Aim to make frequent connections between strengthening your reading skills and accomplishing your goals. Start with a level of reading difficulty that is comfortable and with materials that you find interesting. If you think you need significant assistance with your reading skills, it is best to get a professional reading assessment and to work one-on-one with a reading specialist. However, if you're not able to get a formal reading assessment, you can still take the steps shown here to self-assess. Step 1. Set individual reading goals and speak with your professors about specific reading difficulties, past educational experiences, including any special reading help you have received, and other abilities and interests that may motivate your goal setting. Step 2. Working with a tutor, classmate, or on your own, test your reading comprehension to get a measure of how much you understand when silently reading to yourself and establish a baseline for progress. Step 3. Test your reading fluency by reading a short passage out loud as rapidly as possible with accuracy and then count the number of words read in 1 minute. Reading under 125 words per minute indicates a need for more reading practice. Next, we will explain the basic reading skills in more detail. First, speech sounds. Why do we need to understand speech sounds? Written English uses symbols, letters, that represent sounds in spoken words. When sounding out a word, we must be able to 1. Say the sounds, 2. Blend the sounds in sequence, and 3. Recognize the words produced. For many learners, this process breaks down at steps 2 and 3. Learning how to sound out words helps readers identify words while reading. It also helps readers spell words as they write. A reader who struggles to blend sounds and recognize words may have difficulty sounding out spoken words and guessing at their spelling. For this reader, a string of sounds doesn't automatically translate to a whole word. Building phonemic speech sound awareness involves exercises such as saying individual sounds like S and noticing how the sounds are made with the lips and the teeth, and practicing blending different sounds with vowels and consonants. Second, decoding. Why is decoding important? Because English uses letters to represent sounds, written language is a sort of code. Readers must learn to break the code by correctly matching letters with their sounds. Without this ability, readers must memorize thousands of words by sight, which is an inefficient strategy. On the other hand, learning to rapidly identify or decode words leads to fluency and understanding. Relying too much on sight memories of words rather than learning to sound out words can reinforce a beginning reader's bad habit of guessing a word's meaning based on its appearance. Instead, beginning readers can use the following sequence for identifying an unknown word. Step 1. Try to sound out the word from left to right. Do you recognize the word? Does it make sense in the sentence? If yes, go on reading. Step 2. If not, try a different vowel sound, for instance, replacing the short I sound for a long I sound, or look for a syllable that you recognize. Then put the parts together and try again. Do you now recognize the word? Does it make sense in the sentence? If yes, go on reading. Step 3. If not, read to the end of the sentence again and think of a word that makes sense. Does this word match some of the letter sounds? If yes, go on reading, but make a note to check on the word later. Step 4, if not, ask for help. Third, fluency. Why is fluency important? Fluency, which is rapid, efficient decoding, is required for comprehension. Comprehension lessens when readers have to focus on getting the words off the page and aren't able to give much attention to the meaning of what they are reading. In contrast, fluent readers are able to focus on meaning. For them, decoding words and meaning is automatic and effortless. Readers can become fluent by reading more often. Fluent reading involves interpretation, which is grouping words into phrases and using word knowledge and punctuation to determine pacing, pauses, intonation, and expression. Even when words are read accurately, a flat word-by-word reading doesn't sound like speech and therefore doesn't convey the writer's entire message. In speech, we group words into phrases, pause and slow down to make an important point, and emphasize key words. Most texts provide clues to phrasing, emphasis, and tone through punctuation, bold print, descriptive words, and signal words or phrases such as finally, however, therefore, and consequently. Fluent readers notice and use those clues as well as their knowledge of how to form phrases and are therefore able to read in a manner that preserves the meaning the writer intended to convey. As shown on this slide, you can become more fluent by reading more often. Any of the approaches listed on this slide can help improve fluency. Notice that all are guided, repeated, oral reading practices. First, reading to each other or with each other. Pairs of learners take turns reading and rereading the same passage to each other, or they read aloud simultaneously. Second, reading while listening to a recorded text. Using recorded readings, a learner is able to learn more independently, reading along while listening to the recorded passage. Sometimes learners are instructed to listen and read the passage a set number of times, usually at least 3. Alternatively, the direction might be to reread until they feel able to read it accurately and comfortably. And third, reading aloud or practicing for a presentation. Learners might use performance reading to present the findings of a project or problem that they have studied together, selecting text from different sources to illustrate important facts or concepts. They might divide up sections or roles and practice reading their parts aloud to each other and to the teacher. They might also tape their readings so all readers can assess their delivery and make improvements. Performances like these give readers a real reason to reread text. Fourth, vocabulary. Why is vocabulary important? Readers can't understand a writer's message unless they understand the meanings of most of the words in the text. As readers begin to read nonfiction in various subjects, they often come across words that are not in their spoken vocabularies. This is why we need to build vocabulary so that we can read a variety of materials. How can you build and grow your vocabulary? First, read more often. Figure out word meanings by how they relate to other words. Then, look for those same words in new contexts. Soon, you will recognize and understand words in a variety of subject areas. Follow your curiosity. Read material related to your educational, vocational, recreational, and family goals. Use a dictionary. Look up word meanings, how words are used in the sentence, their substitutes or synonyms, and their opposites. Write down new words in a personal word bank. Learn difficult words. Look for homophones such as allowed and allowed, board and board, break and break, your and your, and look for homographs such as bear, the animal, versus bear, to carry or support, versus bear, which means to endure. Don't fake it. Readers who bluff their way through words and concepts they don't fully understand may learn false or incomplete information. Find your tools. Learn common prefixes and suffixes and practice using them to change the meaning and function of basic words. And finally, learn useful words. Look for signal words and phrases such as therefore or in contrast that show relationships between ideas. Look for idiomatic expressions, words in the news, and education or job-related terminology. Here is an activity you can use with any reading assignment in any course that you are taking. First, read an assigned article, chapter, etc. silently, noting any unfamiliar words. Second, work with a tutor or classmate to discuss the words you don't understand, share possible meanings, and explain how you arrived at your conclusions. Write down the words and your suggested definitions. Third, look up two of these words in the dictionary, find the definitions that best fit the way the words are used in the assignment, and write them down. Fourth, discuss the definitions with your tutor or classmate. Write down your agreed upon understanding of what the words mean. Fifth, make word cards to file in a vocabulary box or add the definitions to your notebook. Include both of the definitions and a sample sentence for each word. And finally, number 6, use both words in your next writing assignment. Fifth, comprehension. This is the ultimate goal of reading. The definition of reading comprehension appears to be both simple and obvious, when in fact it is anything but. Reading comprehension seems like a simple concept because for good readers, the comprehension process has become more or less automatic. Most of the time, good readers don't think about what they are doing to make sense of text, to find important information, to learn how to do something, or to follow events in a story. That's why one might answer, comprehension is understanding what you read. And it is, of course, but those who have studied reading prefer a definition that emphasizes that good readers work at understanding. They are active and intentional, and they construct meaning by using the message in the text as well as their own prior knowledge. So comprehension involves interacting with text in various ways. Michael Presley says that good readers do many or all of the practices shown on this slide, depending on whether they are reading to seriously learn, reading to locate a specific piece of information, or reading for pleasure. Let's take a look at several practices of good readers that help them understand what they read. Good readers know why they are reading a text. They preview the text before reading. make predictions about what they expect to read, they read selectively based on their preview, and compare ideas in the text with what they already know. Good readers note whether their predictions and expectations about text content are correct. They revise their prior knowledge when compelling new ideas conflict with prior knowledge, and figure out the meanings of unfamiliar vocabulary based on how the words are used in context, and then they check those definitions in the dictionary. Good readers paraphrase and write notes to remember important points, interpret the text, evaluate the text quality, review important points after they finish reading, and think about how ideas in the text might be used in the future. The sixth and last, but not least, reading skill is motivation. How can we find our motivation? For what reasons do we read? One option might be that we're trying to learn about something, like when we're reading an interesting newspaper or magazine article, or we might be reading to research a subject or to study for a test. Perhaps we're reading to be entertained, or maybe we want to learn how to do something, like when we're following directions for a project or a recipe, or when we're trying to operate an appliance. And finally, we might be reading to find specific information, like when we're looking for the due date on a bill, or finding details about medical charges on a doctor's statement, or when we're checking TV or movie listings. Now we're going to move from an explanation of reading skills to some reading activities. The following strategies are intended to develop metacognitive abilities in readers, that is, to help you think about how much you are actually understanding while reading. Using these techniques, readers learn how to actively monitor their understanding, identify specific problems when comprehension breaks down, and take steps to solve their comprehension problems. You might try one or more of the following: thinking aloud, restating, asking questions, coding the text, and using repair strategies. The first way to sharpen your reading awareness is to think aloud. Here's an activity you can try. Working with a classmate or a tutor, take turns reading a passage to each other and explaining how you process the information you are reading. When you run into problems, stop to reread or restate a difficult section, summarize long sentences, put them into your own words, look back in the text to find the person or thing that a pronoun refers to, identify important versus not so important information, and use context clues and a dictionary to figure out the meanings of unknown words. Here are two more strategies to monitor your reading comprehension. Restating. Working with a tutor or classmate, stop after every paragraph and try to restate in your own words what has been read. If you have trouble doing this, you are not yet understanding the text. Another strategy is to ask questions. Working with a tutor or classmate, take turns asking each other who, what, when, where, and why questions after each paragraph or page. If you can't answer these questions, you will need to stop and reread. Another strategy for monitoring your comprehension is to code the text. Working on your own, make notes as you read. You can use a system like the one shown here, or you can create your own coding system. Just keep it easy to use and clear. As you can see with this particular coding system shown on this slide, you can use an equal sign to represent that you agree with the information. You can use an X to show that you disagree. You can use a plus sign to show that it's new information. You can use an exclamation point for emphasis, question mark to show that you haven't quite understood what's being said there, or you can use an asterisk to note it as important information. Finally, these comprehension measures are similar to the problem-solving steps for decoding words that we looked at earlier. Repair strategies. Try these practices for the following problems. If you can't read the word, first sound it out. Then read to the end of the sentence and think of a word that makes sense. If this works, keep reading. If not, you might not know the word's meaning and you should go to the next strategy. Step 1, read the sentence to the end and see if you can guess the meaning. Is it an action word, the name of something, or a describing word? Step 2, see if the word has prefixes, suffixes, or any word parts that you already know. Step 3, do you absolutely need to know the word to understand the text? If not, skip it for now, and if yes, go ahead and look it up in the dictionary. So if you're confused, you still don't get it, you find that it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't fit with what you already know, try this strategy. First, read on to see if the meaning gets clearer. Next, try reading out loud. Then consider if it's a word that's being used in a confusing way. Check the word in the dictionary. And finally, talk about your problem with a tutor, a classmate, or your professor. In this final section of the presentation, we will focus on college reading skills specifically. Maybe you are a fairly confident or even a very confident reader. You may still run into the following situation. If you're like most people, you begin reading and all is well until your mind starts to wander, but your brain doesn't immediately realize that it is no longer paying attention because your eyes are still tracking the text. Plus, if you're a sub-vocalizer, you can hear the words as you read, even though you're thinking about something entirely unrelated. It's not until you get further down the page that you realize, oh, I stopped paying attention ages ago and I have no idea what I've read. At this point, what do you usually do? If you're like most people, you go back and reread the text from the beginning, but this time around you concentrate harder to keep yourself from running off the rails. And you will probably get a little further, but only a little before the same thing happens again. And then what do? Start over again. You can see where this is going. But you can prevent this vicious cycle by engaging in particular practices before, during, and after you read. These practices are as follows. Know your textbook, preview or survey, come up with questions the reading can answer, and finally paraphrase and summarize. Textbooks aren't mystery novels. There's nothing to be gained by keeping yourself in the dark. In fact, the more you know about your textbooks in advance, the better off you'll be. Later, you'll be glad you did because you'll be able to see how the various parts of the course fit together. Here's what you can do when you first get your textbooks. Read the preface. You will learn the author's objective and qualifications, the organizational plan of the book, and how and why the book is unique. Read the introduction. This provides a preview of the book itself. Scan the table of contents. You will see how chapter topics fit together. Look at the appendices, glossaries, bibliographies, references, and indexes at the end of the book. These offer access to specific information that you may need. Before you begin to read a textbook chapter, read the title, read the introductory paragraph, read the chapter's ending paragraph, scan the major subheadings to understand the chapter's structure, scan lists, charts, and graphs, and look for bold-faced, italicized, or underlined text. At last, you're ready to settle in and read, right? Well, maybe not. Just as no 4-year-old likes to hear, "You have to because I said so," neither does your brain like to hear that. So before you begin to read, it's very helpful to come up with questions that you hope the reading will answer. That way, when you start to read, you now have a reason to read, and your mind will be focused looking for the answers to the questions that you generated and will consequently be able to stay focused longer. Let's take a look at this example. So a bold-faced heading in the chapter that we were assigned to read was "The Heart of My Work, Metacognitive Strategies." Some questions that I hope the chapter will answer might be, what are metacognitive strategies? How can these benefit me? What do these have to do with what I'm reading? Can I use these easily? Why are these strategies close to the author's heart? Another practice of good readers is paraphrasing and summarizing. The goal of paraphrasing is to identify the central idea of a sentence, a series of sentences, or a paragraph. Paraphrasing is a valuable study skill because readers cannot remember everything they read, so they need to be sure they focus on the most important facts and ideas. While there are several ways to paraphrase a paragraph, such as identifying the topic and main idea or mapping out the paragraph, one of the easiest is this three-step process. First, what is the topic of the paragraph? What subject is the author writing about? Second, what is the author's purpose in writing about that subject? Is it to define, explain, or describe something? Is it to persuade the reader to agree with an opinion or to take some kind of action? Or is it to criticize or defend a person or action? And third, given the purpose, what is the author trying to make the reader understand about the topic? If the author is defining something, what is that definition? If the author is trying to persuade, then what is their primary argument? The goal of summarizing is to identify the central ideas in a series of paragraphs. When you summarize by following the method on this slide, you not only break the task into manageable chunks, but you also integrate those chunks into a complete understanding of the topic. First, read the first paragraph and stop. Put the information you just read into your own words. Then read the second paragraph. Now when you paraphrase, you should also fold in the information from the first paragraph. Finally, when you read the third paragraph, your paraphrase should now contain all of the information from the beginning of the passage and so on. Does this sound like it will be an arduous process that will take a long time? Well, guess what? Students report that it takes them less time to finish their reading assignments with this system than with the one they had been using previously. Graduate students in particular say that it helps them move briskly through research papers. When asked why they think it works, students say, "I'm not rereading or having a bunch of false starts." Although they are reading more slowly, they are only moving forward, so the end comes much more quickly and with a much deeper understanding. It's like the tortoise and the hare. Slow and steady wins the race. So we've covered quite a bit of information in this presentation, including an in-depth definition of reading, a detailed discussion of reading skills and techniques, ways to sharpen your reading comprehension, and strategies for smarter college-level reading. We want you to leave with this important fact. Reading opens many doors. It opens doors to employment, training, higher education, as well as lifelong learning. Adults who read well have an easier time earning a living wage, they have an easier time supporting their children's learning, and they have an easier time fully participating in civic and community life. Good readers can access a wealth of print information and experience the joys of reading for pleasure. In conclusion, the more you read, the faster and more fluent your reading will become. The greater your vocabulary will grow, the more information you will learn about various subjects, the more words you will easily understand, the more interested you will become in what you are reading, and the more you will want to read. This concludes our presentation. Thanks for joining us. If you have any questions, send us an email at arc@mercer.edu. Also, be sure to check out our website at arc.mercer.edu. If you would like additional information, check out the textbook shown on this slide.